And thank you so much for joining us for Gen V Voices That Vote, igniting political literacy and dialogue with youth. I am Nicole Cush, and I am your host. Now, this wonderful event has been made possible by a generous grant by the United Way of Asheville, Buncombe County. We thank them so much for investing in us. And as always, Glitter Sisters, our main sponsor is Dogwood Health Trust. So we want to say a huge shout out and thank you to them as well. Let me introduce to you the panelists because we need to get ready to dive in. Okay, first of all, Carol Goins, who is a Raleigh native and went to North Carolina Central to obtain her Juris Doctorate, came to Asheville and is now a practicing family attorney in Asheville. What I love about Carol, though, and the reason why we've invited her here is Carol, I have had the opportunity to witness her with her brilliance of voter registration rights and history, and literally awaken and spark excitement in scholars that typically would be a little apathetic. So she is a guru when it comes to this civic engagement, and I'm so excited to hear from her. And our next panelist, the lovely and amazing Angelica Wynn. Angelica, too, pursued her Juris Doctorate at Central. I don't think they were there at the same time, but they will clarify that for me. But Angelica is coming to us from the nonprofit sector. And her name truly encompasses the work that she does. For anyone who has interacted with her, she truly is angelic in her approach in handling people and getting folks civically engaged.
I have to say, Nicole, I really appreciate your introduction and you hyping me up. And so just a background, I serve two roles. One, I work with nonprofits, doing some work with WNC Nonprofit Pathways, but I also have another role where I work with a statewide organization that works to create a fair, just, and equitable North Carolina for everyone. And we do some of our pillars are around civic engagement, including census, redistricting, and so forth. And so, and Carol and I did not go to Central at the same time, but we both are fellow legal eagles.
Legal Eagles.
Yes,
I love
yes.
it. I love that. Oh, so this is what we're going to discuss. How have recent voter registration laws or district changes impacted local participation?
Great. Carol, do you want me to go
Yeah,
ahead?
who would like to start?
I'll go ahead and jump in quickly. I don't know that we know exactly about the participation yet, because some of the things we haven't had elections statewide or district wide that where that would come. Yet they are fast approaching. 2026 elections will be here, next week, as the way time tends to go. But I think what we need to understand is that there are a lot of things, and we're going to get into this, of course, but there's a lot of reasons why these impediments were put in place, and that's really what most of them are. Um, People can throw out words like voter integrity and safe and secure elections, and 90% or more of the time, it's really just a fancy schmancy way of saying we're trying to keep people from voting. And that's just what the bottom line is. And they're counting on people not paying attention, not being politically aware or literate, and hearing a little bit of something which might be true. This you might say this much, and that might honestly be true, but the whole story is this much. So if you only know this much, then you don't really know the whole context, the whole information. And so I think that's where the big issue is the disinformation that's out there, the lies that are out there, and people getting information from, not good sources.
Right. Thank you for sharing that, Carol. Angelica, did you want to comment on that?
I wholeheartedly agree with Carol in the sense that because we have not had a statewide election, 2026 really is going to show to us what the impact will be. What we do know, again, back to the impediments, is the piece around requiring photo ID, and now we've changed like same-day registration rules. And most recently, what if y'all had heard, but I think it was like last month, what ended up happening is new district maps were redrawn, like they were redrawn,
Mhm.
which severely gerrymandered representation where it's very narrow and really skewing it toward one political party versus the other. There is a lawsuit, so we have yet, and the lawsuit just came about, so we have yet to see what the outcome of that will be. For anyone that's been in North Carolina long enough, it is not an abnormality for us to be in court around districts. It's in fact a very historic ingrained piece in our state. And so at the end of the day, there's still a lot to be seen in the upcoming year. But to Carol's point is the one thing that we have seen a lot of is impediments as it relates to making voting less accessible and not as enticing to do, right? And the reality is that we need to be making it more accessible so that people can be engaged in voting.
In our last local election, only in our 18 to 29 demographic, which I kind of take personally because a lot of those were scholars that I've interacted with. In our local election, the last one, only 2.4% turned out to vote. And that was before I think some of the major impediments have been put into place. So when we look at figures like that and we talk about these issues, what are some of the things that you think scholars can do? And I think what I'm really concerned about are those scholars that once they're able to vote and then they're off at college, for example. What are some of the things that you may recommend that they pay attention to?
I actually just had a similar discussion with some young scholars at SILSA.
Mhm.
Let's see, maybe a month ago.
Great school.
Yes. First of all, register. Second of all, make a plan. There are even with the impediments that are out there, and there's some more that are coming that are going to hit women, probably more older women who are married or have been married more so than some of the young people we're focusing on, but it's still something to think about because yes, some young people do get married. But make a plan. If you're going to go to college, then you can register where you're in school. Now, when I went to school, I was born and raised in Raleigh and registered in Raleigh, and I went to school at North Carolina Central in Durham. From my dorm to my house was about 40 minutes, depending on traffic. And so my mother would get off from work. She was a teacher, drive to Durham, pick me up. We'd go vote together, have dinner. She'd drop me back off at the dorm. Um, it probably wasn't as far as some people commute to and from work, even here in Buncombe County. Now, people who were from in Durham, but they were from Wilmington, maybe going home that day was not possible. But now that we have early voting, when you can vote on weekends and things like that, maybe you'll just plan that'll be a weekend I go home and I can vote on a Saturday or Sunday. Just double check when the polls are open in your home county. You can vote by mail. There are some people who are trying to take that right away. I really don't think that it will go away because that's how the military vote. That's how a lot of older people vote who have transportation issues, people in nursing homes. Just because you're old doesn't mean you lose your right to vote. So I do think we're going to still keep, but then make a plan. Again, just sit down and say, okay, the early voting, and you can do it with your feet propped up on your phone. You can get the schedule. Oh, okay, I can go home this weekend and I can go at Saturday and then I can hang out with my friends the rest of the day and then go back on Sunday. Or are you going to register where you are in school? Depending on how far away you are. Or just maybe you just decided you want to support that particular community. So when you get to school, then you can register there, but just make sure that you are registered and that you have an ID that has the address of where you're living so that you can that your ID and where you're registering match. Um, and we can get into some of those particulars later, but um, it's just decide ahead of time where you want to vote and then make a plan and then have a backup plan. I plan to go home this day, but I couldn't make it because of whatever. So here's my backup plan.
I'm all for the particulars now too, so we don't want to put anything off. But if you wanted to keep going, but Angelica, did you want to add to that?
I think in terms of adding more about how we can work with scholars around voting, I do agree the piece around the plan. Whether you are in school or you're deferring, to have a plan for everyone, I would suggest have a plan to try to vote as soon as possible. Sometimes in the past, what we've experienced where their polling or their voting place has been moved prior to that. And so what we want to do is plan enough time. I know there's a really beautiful thing about voting on election day. And that there's a lot of excitement around that. And but what I would suggest, if you're one of those folks, is make a plan to ensure that your polling place is still the same place as it was last time. Because what we don't want to do is that you show up at your polling place and it turns out that it's changed, and then you're like, I took time off during my lunch to come and do this, now I can't do it, that type of thing. You want to be able to anticipate as much as possible to ensure that the place that you're going is where you're supposed to vote, and that you have everything that you will need to have at the time, right? So you're not turned away or anything like that. So definitely have a plan around that. In terms of like engaging youth in understanding the importance of voting and just making it as a part of it's just what we do. For example, I have a daughter, and I would take her every time that I would go vote so that she saw me in action voting, but also just to normalize it. Like that's just what we do, right? In
Mhm.
the same way that with my kiddo, it wasn't of like a question of, are you are you thinking about going to college? Are you going to go to school after you graduate high school? It's just a conversation of where are you going for college, or where, whether it's a local community college or university, but just making it as that's what the expectation is. So similar with around voting, that's just what we do. We get informed and we go, and this is what the process looks like. So when she gets a time like to the voting age, that she's just kind of like, yeah, I'm doing what was expected of me, and I know more or less how it plays out because my mom took me to it, right? And just normalizing that piece. The other piece is having those conversations. I know it's hard because it's nebulous because we don't see it, but sometimes just having those conversations with youth of, hey, do you remember that law where now they're trying to restrict cell phones from school? Well, that was a law. This is how it was created, right? There were concerned parents and educators that went to talk to the representative, and this is how we ended up with you no longer being able, so being able to make those connections with real issues, and I say real issues, but more of like that connects to them, but issues that they think it's important, right? And say that this is how it came about, and so just having like that literacy. Another thing is that when election comes, hey, just print out some like sample ballots and just kind of have that conversation with your kid or your teen or your scholar of, let's just practice of what it's like to vote. What do you need to be doing and things like that. So that again, it's just a natural thing that they do and they have some experience in doing.
And also
Exactly.
following up with what Angelica said, um, again, you don't have to go out far. You can go sit right at home on your computer, on your phone, on your tablet, laying across your bed, propped up on the couch, wherever you're comfortable, and can look online at the ballots. All of the candidates, it used to be you'd get all these little flyers in the mail. You don't have to do that anymore. You can get the ballot and go. And Angelica's Wynn is running for mayor of Asheville. Well, who is she? She's going to have a website. She's going to have people on there who have endorsed her. Just Google Angelica or go to the website and you can find out all the basic information. The newspapers endorse, the Citizen Times endorse, Mountain Express endorses, some of the other
Organizations. Yeah.
organizations. If you are
Hmm.
big into the environment, then go to I just went blank, the Sierra Club endorses, the NAACP generally endorses, workers unions, things
Hmm.
like that. Look and see what does the for example, since we're talking about scholars and we have educators on here, and I'm from a family of educators, somebody is running for, in all honesty, if somebody is running for superintendent of public instruction, which is the person in North Carolina who heads all of the public schools in North Carolina, I want to see that they've got some kind of education background.
Exactly. And
If
lived experience.
Exactly.
Yes.
What have you done? And everybody can bring different lived experiences, but tell me what you've done that qualifies you for this job. You might be good at that job, but if you're asking for this one, what is it that you've done that you say you're qualified? And again, you don't have to do it all at one time. You can get the ballot and look up these two today and these two tomorrow and those two the other day. Um, you know, Sometimes it really does come down to watch the news. And the news cycle is 24 hours. So, oh well, I didn't get out of basketball practice and get home till 7, so the news was off. News is on 24 hours a day. News is
Mhm.
on your phone, news is on everything. Because it used to be, and I'm probably the oldest one by a few years on this panel, um, everybody went home and watched the 6 o'clock local news and the 6:30 national news, and he had three stations. You've got a variety of places you can get information from now, and look at more than one. It's great to look at MSNBC, but look at some others, or look at Fox, or look at wherever you feel speaks to you, and maybe even look at something. If you like Fox, maybe watch MSNBC just to sort of see what they're saying, or vice versa. The information is
Mhm.
out there, and what I say is, don't do what they're counting on, which is people not paying attention. Sitting in the barbershop or sitting in the beauty parlor is great, but don't let that be where you get all your information. Maybe you don't need to listen to just what cousin Pookie said. Maybe you should take some time to look into things yourself so you can be, secure in yourself. Maybe cousin Pookie is right and start with what he said, sitting in the barbershop. Is candidate X, whatever. That might
Right.
be a starting point, but don't let that be an end point just because somebody said something. Because as we have all seen with the last election in 2024, there's a lot of just flat out lies that get told. Sometimes it's misinformation, sometimes it's pieces of information, and sometimes it's just flat out lies. And you just sometimes got to call a thing, and you
Right.
need to be able to figure out, you know, what is maybe an opinion and what's a flat out lie.
Yeah. Can
I think
I
AI is making it a challenge. I'm sorry. Go ahead,
Yes.
Angelica.
I
Go ahead.
think Carol touched on some pieces around misinformation. And one of the things for us to be when we talk about scholars is really emphasizing critical thinking skills, right? What does it mean to look at something critically? What does it mean for you to be asking the questions? Not going back to my kiddo, but I would say this to any youth, which is saying, look, your dad's going to tell you some things. I'm going to tell you some things, and that could shape what kind of opinions you have. And what I would love is for you is like, I might tell you an opinion or how I feel about a certain thing. I would expect for you to research and come up with your own opinion, but I can help inform it, but I also want to invite you to seek out information because eventually you're going to get to the point that you're going to form your own opinions. Just let it be an
Mhm.
informed opinion. The other piece that I was thinking as well to add on with Carol and what you're saying is like, you got the internet. The other thing that we've noticed is that more and more candidates are using TikTok and that you can actually get information about their platform, what are they voting for, whether or not. And back in the day, you used to have to see where the candidate was going to be speaking. You'd
Yes.
have to show up and then you'd have to pose your question in front of a group of a bunch of people. But now with like Facebook and TikTok and more candidates utilizing that as a tool, that you actually have like can go straight to the source and say, how do you feel about Medicare? Or, and that they would be able to answer those type of questions, right? Because they are now um, harnessing the internet in a way to be able to communicate to folks, right? And that's a good way to do it. The other thing I would suggest in conversations before I wrap up is that um, there isn't going to be one candidate that is going to represent all your issues and how you lean toward. So sometimes you have to ask yourself, like, what are the issues that are core and are a priority to me, right? Like maybe like environmental, gun rights, like, all these other things. And then,
Healthcare.
and like healthcare, and
Mhm.
what is my view on those issues? And then do the comparison with the candidates or even just straight up ask the candidate, like, how do you feel about childcare, after school childcare? Do you support it? How do you feel about youth behavioral health? Do you support that? And then go from there. But definitely come up with a list of what are your top like non-negotiables when it comes to voting for a candidate, right? For example, I research and I'm not going to vote for a candidate that is against reproductive health for women. And so it's just a matter of figuring out what are your priorities because there isn't going to be a candidate that's going to be spot on with you on all the issues.
Wow. You all just, okay, first of all, we had a question that came up. I just want to take it back to address the question and then go back to what you were saying. When we're talking about scholars who are out of state, that's where it could get tricky. And those absentee ballots, you want to go that route. As a scholar who went to college out of state, I drove home from Boston to New Jersey to vote and that was back when they didn't ask for ID back in the day. So I would think if you're not going to get your license or your stuff at your residence hall where you're living in a new state, then take care of the absentee ballot. Just want to make sure we address that question.
Well, and what I would say is every state is a little different.
Yes.
So, one of the things you can do when making your plan or making your decision, and also I think it is a little different if you have off campus housing, like if you have an apartment versus living in the dorm.
Living on
So
campus.
yeah, do your, as everybody says, do your
Do
research
your
in
research.
the school
Exactly.
for the state where you're going to be going to school, because it may be easier to go home. I mean, again, if you're here in Western North Carolina and you go to Clemson, that it might be easy just to come home a weekend.
Hmm.
If you live in Asheville, but you decide to go to the University of Idaho, it might be a little bit
A little
more,
bit harder.
a bit harder. um,
Exactly. And
but
like you said, it depends on the laws of the state.
uh,
Um, and I know some states have made it more of a challenge for college students to vote, North Carolina being one of them. So
yes,
I think it just really depends on where you go.
but you
So,
can still, if you are a student and your
mhm,
primary residence is still here in North Carolina, you may have an address. I mean, you got to live somewhere if you
right.
if you leave home to go to school. I mean, I stayed in Latham Hall 4 years at North Carolina Central, but um, so you will have an address of some sorts wherever it is you're in school, but just figure out which way. But you can still always do the absentee ballot and mail-in ballot for North Carolina, even if you are at the University of Idaho.
Awesome. Thank you for clarifying that. One thing, Carol, when I've had you come and speak with students at Silsa when I was a principal there was the shock that they could not make the connection of things that were happening in school with the politicians that were in place. And they would look at me like, man, oh, that's not fair. Well, can you speak a little bit more to just that congruence and the importance of them understanding those issues? And then I just want to also put a spin on it too, Angelica, and I guess you can please chime in as well. But Pram and I were talking about that earlier, making those connections from the food you eat to the doctors you visit to the classes that are offered in your school and who's leading your school. Those are decisions that are made sometimes that are politically motivated, but then people stop and say, well, I'm not political. What do we say to those folks that say, I'm not political, I don't want to talk about politics?
Well, when people say that, then they're not being realistic. Politics is everywhere for students. And when we talk about school, we're talking about kindergarten, preschool through, postdoc.
Yeah.
And because politics and who you elect and voting, you take a stance when you vote, you take a stance when you don't vote. Whether you realize it or not, voting has consequences, not voting has consequences, usually bad ones for not voting.
Mhm.
So if we're talking about like preschool and after school care, things like that, then the state budget would fund that. They're the ones. The state sets the criteria for what do you need to have to be a daycare operator. What are the standards for you to get the stars or 5 stars, whatever the highest one, I can't remember.
I think it's
Or
five.
versus,
Yeah.
yeah, versus a 2 star. Who makes
Mhm.
that decision? Those are things that the legislature in North Carolina sets. When you talk about actual school, like kindergarten through 12th grade, school boards, they're the ones who will hire the principals and the teachers. The state superintendent of public instruction, I had to get the job title out. They're the ones who decide what books are read or not read. And trust me, that is a multi-million-dollar endeavor, writing school textbooks. And so whoever gets the contracts, North Carolina is the fifth biggest state in terms of enrollment. Wake County Public School System is the largest in the state. Yeah, it edges out Mecklenburg County, not by much,
Mhm.
but it is.
But it's
And,
bigger, yeah.
and so those are multi-million-dollar contracts. So you can't, you got to understand how political it is. Do we go with this book or that book? Um, what's in the books? What books can you even have in the library? Can you read The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison? Can you read Huck Finn by Mark Twain? Two great American writers whose books have been banned. Um,
Right.
and Helica mentioned, cell phones in classrooms or students having access during the school day to their cell phones. There's pros and cons. Yes, it's great if there's an emergency, but
Right.
it can be a distraction otherwise when it's a non-emergency. So who's going to decide on what way that goes? School board. How do they get to be on the school board? They are elected. Um, if you're talking about the streets in front of your house, why is this street in front of my house so raggedy? Why are there big potholes? Well, that's decided by the city council. They're the ones who do, city works. So everything that you do is going to be decided by, in some way, and affected by politicians. So if you say I'm not political and I don't vote, then you're just giving away all of your power to people who will then consider you not particularly relevant because they can't
Yeah.
depend on you to vote for them. They can't depend on you to support their campaign. So they're not going to focus on you. And I mean, we can argue, oh, you're supposed to be the elected mayor of everybody, and blah 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 blah, and that's really nice, but we're dealing with human beings. And also, the United States Supreme Court decided several years ago in Citizens United, that's the name of the case, that corporations are people. And so now you have millions and millions and millions of dollars that are coming into states to influence campaigns. I think I heard Governor Roy Cooper, who is now running for the U.S. Senate seat, that's currently held by Senator Tom Tillis, who's retiring. He's not seeking reelection, and Governor Cooper is the Democratic nominee presumptive. And he said that the estimates are he's going to need to raise, I think I heard $30 million to run a competitive campaign because U.S. Senate is elected statewide. So from Murphy to Manio, as they say. Um, so if you're not in that process in some way, now that's not his choice. I think the vast majority of the candidates would love to not be so focused on raising money, and actually dealing with and hearing from the people. I think really and truly most of them would be. But the reality is, if you don't have the money, you can't run a competitive campaign. Um, so you give up your power. And what I always tell people is think about it this way. For the better part of the United States as a country is almost 250 years old. We're 249 years this past July 4th. If voting wasn't important and if voting wasn't powerful, why have so many people fought to this very moment to keep so many other people from doing it? When this country was first founded, only white men who owned land could vote. Not even all white men. You had to be a well-to-do or rich white man. And then they thought, well, they're white men, so we'll let them vote, even though maybe they're not rich. White women couldn't vote. Even free African Americans could not vote. Latinos could not vote. Native Americans could not vote. And even after with the 15th Amendment to the Constitution, it really only guaranteed Black men the right to vote. And that really only happened during Reconstruction. Women didn't get the right on paper to vote until 1920. Then Black people as a group until 1964 and 65 with the Civil Rights Acts. So, most of us have only had the legal right to vote for about 60 years. And they're now, saying that, your name on your ID has to match the name on your birth certificate. Well, that's great if you're not a married woman.
Right.
60 or 7, I think 70% of married women in this country take their husband's name. Some hyphenate and all of that. But if you were born Mary Elizabeth Smith and now you're Mary Smith Jones, then do you have to go get your birth certificate and then go get your marriage certificate? And then if you got divorced, then you got to go. Men don't have to, very few men would have to do that. It was done to hurt trans people who have changed their names. They were born John Smith and now they're Jenny Smith. But what it's going to do is hurt women, a significant portion of women across the board. So understand, if it wasn't important, if it didn't count, people wouldn't be working so hard to keep so many from voting. So why would you want to give away your power?
And the best way that you can hold an elected official accountable is by voting, whether it's voting for a different candidate and so forth around that. And also this idea that even though you have a candidate that got elected that you didn't necessarily vote for, doesn't mean you still can't hold that representative accountable and reach out to them because they represent me. They might not have been of the party that I voted in, but they are there to represent me, and that I can still reach out to that elected official and advocate for issues that I believe in. But and outside from voting is, again, look at their platforms, hold them accountable. But the other piece is the importance of folks running for office as well. The importance of getting folks from our communities to run, right? Because as long as we keep having the same candidates because we're not running, then that's what we're going to get. But
Exactly.
exactly, so encouraging folks about of the possibility of running, getting the tools to run for office. You don't have to start like at the state level. You can start with your local elections. In fact, I really appreciate Carol going into it because the reality is that we have the national elections, but the elections that impact you the most are the local ones, right? And so you can run for like a commission, you can, you all kinds of different ways. You can run for city council, you can run for school board. There are all kinds of different things that you can run for that directly impact your community at a larger scale than national elections. And so just to be able to educate folks around the importance of themselves running for office and supporting other candidates, right? That look like us, that
Yes.
have values like us. And, I really appreciate the part about you lifting up around people being apolitical. Being apolitical is being political, right? It's just a way of kind of moving the conversation along versus accountability and what does that mean. And so being able to have those conversations with folks around the importance of knowing the discussion of what your values are, right? What we've learned or what we've seen is more and more conversations of, I'm just going to say it, us in the South, we don't talk about money, we don't talk about religion, and we
Religion.
don't talk about politics, right? And that's very ingrained in Southern culture. And the reality is, what we've learned in the last decade or so is that that your values are inextricably tied to politics and who you vote
Hmm.
for and who you don't vote for and how important it is, right? To have people that look like us, that have our values, that are coming from our communities, is vital, and that we have to do that research and we need to support folks that are from our communities when they run for office.
Thank you. And let me just uplift Shirley Chisholm. If you are not familiar with the story of Shirley Chisholm, or if you have not seen the Netflix special movie that Regina King produced about her and starred as her, please watch it
Mhm.
to get an idea of that sort of momentum and that why not you if no one else, right? So
Right.
I think it's really important in having conversations with local politicians. They've bemoaned to me like, yeah, I'd love to see somebody step up, and they want to see the competition. They really do. They want to see people throw their hat in the ring. They want to see other communities represented.
Can I jump in with two quick points?
Absolutely.
Um, there are now, because everything Angelica said is correct, within, actually, I think both of the major parties, more and more organizations that are training and preparing people to run for office. So if that's something you have an interest in, look around. And a lot of these are free, low cost type things. You can learn a lot just by, watching the city council meeting. And even if you can't go because they're in the middle of the afternoon, city council and county commission, they're on opposite Tuesdays. One is first and third, and one is second and fourth. And so when you start to see how things work and all of that, that gives you, some more insight into what's going on. And are the people really doing what I've elected them to do? If you watch the debate and one person is like, then maybe that's not the person you want to vote for the next time, versus the person that's asking questions and making comments, making motions, things like that. Um, the other thing is, and I guess I'll just say it. To me, when people say, "Oh, voting doesn't matter," "Oh, it's all the same," to me that's a cop out. It's a cop out. Um, because they're not the same. They're not. And yes, both, there are some similarities again in that, all candidates need money. Again, you cannot run on prayers and good wishes. You've got to have money. It costs money to have the websites. It costs money if you're going to drive. If Roy Cooper is going to come to Asheville from Raleigh to campaign, somebody's got to put gas in the car.
Hmm. And lodging.
You
Hmm.
got to
And
have some
food.
place to stay.
That's right.
If they're going to have, if he and I think the Republican nominee presumptive is Watley, I think is his name. If they're going to have a debate in Greensboro, well, again, both of them got to get to Greensboro. You got to have staff. I mean, it is what it is. And so all of that information is out there. And, don't say that you're too young. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez was, very young, I think 26 or so when she ran. Madison Cawthorn won from this area, won election to Congress, and he turned 25, I think, which is the minimum age for Congress, I think the day after or so the election. You just have to
Hmm.
be 25 when you're sworn in. So I'm thinking he wasn't even quite 25 when on election day. And they won their elections. Now he's not there anymore, but she still is. If you just do an internet search, go on Facebook, there are several young 20s, early 30s, young folks who have gotten elected to mayors and state legislatures, city council. I saw something that a young man in a town in Georgia, he's still a student at Clark Atlanta University, and got elected mayor of his hometown
Nice.
near Atlanta, so he can commute. So it can be done. It can be done. And as Shirley Chisholm, who happens, I'm gonna throw this in, Soraka, she's our Delta soror,
Yes, she is.
or was, but she said if they don't have a spot for you at the table, bring a
Girls.
folding chair. That's what you just have to do, is show up anyway.
Thank you,
Right.
y'all. Wow, that is so true. Um, I just think it's so important that young people understand that we're looking to you, and school is a wonderful place to start. Let's not excuse that. I mean, as a former teacher and principal, one of my jams was always student leadership. Your vibe attracts your tribe. The best place to get involved is in your school government and your school clubs. Most clubs have some form of leadership where you can find what your jam is, what your vibe is, and then find your tribe. And those are the people that maybe you have these political discussions with, and then you come back and share with your families as well, and get information from all different sides.
Absolutely. And I appreciate you lifting that up. That's where you kind of start getting a little bit of your training, right? In
Yes.
school and school clubs. And because in a way, schools are a microcosm of the world, right?
Yes.
And so that's a great opportunity to start getting a sense of what it means to run for office, what it means to lead, and so forth.
And you can
Thank you.
also do internships, even in high school.
Yes.
See if you can get an internship with the city or with the county. Um,
Mhm.
I was a page one week in the state legislature when I was in high school, and
Yay.
students came. I mean, I lived in Raleigh, but students came from all over the state, and you get paid.
Mhm.
You get paid, not a lot, but you get paid. And you are physically in the legislature. I mean, you're doing stuff like making copies and getting people cups of coffee and all that. It's not hard work.
It's not glamorous work.
No, but you are physically in the legislature to see how things work, committee meetings. You are sponsored by your legislator. You can be in the House or you can be in the Senate. You can get their congressional internships.
Hmm.
Again, back to AOC, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who went to school at Boston University.
BU. Yep.
Um, she was an intern for Senator Ted Kennedy while she was in college.
Hmm.
Um, and now, she's in Congress herself. Some of those are paid, some of them are not. But the experience is great and it looks good on a resume when you're applying to college, when you're applying to graduate school, professional school, or even just going to get a job. Politics covers everything. If you are a nurse, if you are a doctor, if you are a therapist, all of the passing of who's going to be eligible for Medicaid, who can't get Medicaid. We've talked about how politics can influence schools, your streets, your community, your air, the air
Your
that you breathe,
food, your
your
water.
food. Who's going to
Yeah.
pick the food? What kind of criteria do you have for it to be edible? What medicines and treatments that you can have access to? And Helica mentioned women's reproductive rights, but reproductive rights as in I need to have, I have cancer, and so I need to have a certain procedure done. Can you get it done? Can I get married? Who I can marry? Um, gay marriage is possibly on the line. I don't know how they can address gay marriage and not address interracial marriage. That's another
It's
conversation for
coming.
another time. But all of
Hmm.
those things are coming. We thought those things were settled for years. They are not. What age can you get married? Can a family give their 14-year-old child to be married to a 27-year-old man or a 47-year-old man? All of those types of things are influenced by politics. So when you say, "Oh, I don't get into politics, I don't pay any attention to that," then you're not paying attention to life.
Why am I not surprised that you were a page? I had many students that were in the page program. I used to be out in Raleigh. So,
I was
um,
I was Dan Blue's page.
were you? Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah, I was just want to agree with Carol around lots of programs. I myself was a part of a program with the Congressional Hispanic Caucus Institute,
Yes.
and that it has I was part of the graduate program, but they have high school programs as well, where every summer they select so many junior and seniors who can go up and be in DC and see how the sausage is made as it relates to policy and things like that. So there are all kinds of different programs out there for youth to really inquire about and tap into it.
So thank you for sharing the ones that you were personally with. Any others that you wanted to share briefly?
I mean, you got the League of Women Voters.
That's what
Again,
I was going to say.
You got the NAACP, very active in elections.
But there's also the parties. If you have an interest in a particular party, they all have their youth organizations and they have organizations that support the party. So, again, this is a bipartisan issue. We just want to see informed decisions being made.
And many civic organizations have lobbying arms of their organizations. Most are nonpartisan, at least on candidates or parties. They may obviously take a position on an issue, but they're
Mhm.
nonpartisan as it comes out to a particular candidate or a party. So if you're a member of, as you have said, future business leaders, um, some of those in school, some of the, if for those who go off to colleges, if they join Divine Nine organizations, they have legislative arms, and 501c4. I always get the numbers mixed up. That's the new thing now, is they're all getting those auxiliary type organizations. We mentioned NAACP, League of Women Voters, the Sierra Club. And I'll say one thing that I think, because you mentioned earlier, and we are nonpartisan, but it's a saying that I've heard across the board. Democrats like to fall in love with their candidate, and Republicans have learned how to fall in line. And I think that is somewhat true. And I
Interesting.
think that we probably need to come a little bit to the center. Maybe don't just follow blindly, but also, don't wait for that. Don't let the good be the enemy of the perfect. Because, well, that person, there's 5 things I like, and that person only agreed with me on 4. Well, then maybe that's an okay candidate for you to vote for. Don't be so well, I've got to do this is the person, my party, so I have to vote for that person. No, you don't. You
Right.
can, look at North Carolina. We have a Democratic governor, but North Carolina voted for the Republican for president. So you can always vote across party lines. There's nothing that says you have to vote for anybody, whatever letter happens to be by your name.
Wanted to lift up a couple more. One of them is Common Cause in North Carolina. There's also a North Carolina campus voting coalition. We also have Democracy NC as well, that do work around voting that I would recommend reaching out to.
It sounds to me that there's almost no excuse to not get involved. Is it safe to say that, ladies?
Absolutely, 100%. But one of the things I did that I did want to uplift before, because again, no excuses. You can, as a youth, when you go and get your driver's license, they will ask you, do you want to go ahead and register to vote? Say yes, make it easy, just get it done. Obviously, you won't be able to vote until you're 18, but you are already registered. Do it, take advantage of it. Register to vote when you get your driver's license.
You can get an ID sufficient to vote for free at the Board of Elections. If you just need, I don't have most people's ID is their driver's license. And if you don't, and this is also true for your family members, your older family members, maybe grandma doesn't drive anymore, so she let her license expire. If she was over 62 when it expired, then she can use the expired license, or whoever, the expired license. But if it's just somebody who maybe you lost your license, you got too many tickets and you got some points, so you don't have a valid license. I happen to see that at work.
I bet you do.
You can get a free ID. That is an ID, a state ID card, and that would allow you to vote. And again, it's free. But there are ways to just go ahead and do it. Just go ahead and get it. And then again, as Angelica said earlier, if you go early and if there is a problem, then you've got extra days to go get the right ID or go to the right place or whatever. So that's why voting early is important. But I will say, if you do, wherever you vote, early or on the day of election, if you go and someone goes, oh, you're not registered at this precinct, you're supposed to vote at the other one, and say it's 6:30 and they're getting ready to close, they still have to allow you to vote on a provisional ballot. So understand your rights.
And reaffirming what Carol said, know your rights. There, as we get closer to elections, some of the organizations that we named usually publish like know your rights little guides, and so get familiarized with them, take them with you, right?
The North Carolina Black Alliance does a lot of that as well.
So just recapping for those who may not have joined us from the beginning or what have you, but register. That's the most important thing. And make sure you understand how to register. Make sure you make a plan for voting, whether it's with your group, whether you're going away to school, whether you're doing it locally, but bring some critical thinking to all of this. Ask questions and remain curious. Branch out, talk to others. It's okay to talk in the household, but don't stay in that vacuum. Do your research. Don't expect people to spoon feed you everything. Really learn those skills to assess whether or not something, I know it's getting better every day, but some things you really can look at and look critically to determine if it is real or not. Starting locally, like at your school or faith-based organization that you may belong to. Get involved, find leadership opportunities there. A thought leader that I follow mentioned when you start to feel sad and because the news can make you sad. Let's just be real. Try to talk to people may even make you sad because there's more of this instead of coming together and talking. But I think when you think locally, get involved in something that you like, walk to the local library, volunteer, and just work with others. Get outside of your own head when you get caught up in that. Look into all these amazing programs that are being offered for high school students and opportunities for leadership, whether it's taking you down to Raleigh, working for local officials, working for local nonprofits, and volunteering. Not only will it make you feel good, but yes, it will also look fantastic on your resume, like Carol said. So you don't always have to go work for a candidate. Go work for an organization that you're passionate about. Let's not discount lived experience. How did I do with that wrap up, ladies? Did I miss anything?
Incredible, very skillful, I'm impressed.
Thank you. Wow. What are your last words, ladies? What have you got for us?
Last word for me is you have more power than what you think you do or that other people tell you that you have. You can be a part of this. In fact, systems are anticipating that you are not part of it. And going back to Carol's, what she had said a few times, I strongly believe it. If the right to vote and voting wasn't so important and changing of power structures of our country, they wouldn't be trying to stop it, right? And that to me is like, there is no better way to rebel than to vote, because there are systems out there that do not want us to vote. And so no better way than to rebel than to go and vote. Power at the polls.
And what I would say is, if you look back on history, if you look back through the women's in the early part of the 20th century, from the women's suffrage movement, the very first thing that the founders of mine and Cush's sorority did once they found it was to march for women's suffrage. And that was in Black women marching for voting rights in 1913. They were college students. And even some of the not all, but some of the organizers, the white women who put the march together, most of them were fairly young. And if you look through the history of the civil rights movement, the voting rights movement and all for African Americans and others, the majority of the leaders of that were young, in their 30s at the time. Most of them didn't live to see 40, sadly. So it's young people. If you look at the sit-ins, you go back through, I think is either yesterday or today was the anniversary of the sit-ins at A&T. Those were college students. The students that got hosed in the parks in Alabama for marching, those were middle and high school students. Here in Asheville, the student-led organization was high school students. They were 8th and 9th graders through 12th graders. So there is power in our youth. If most of the big changes that have come in our society have been youth-led. So
thank you.
Don't give away your power. Seize your power. And
thank you for saying that. Yes, power in the youth vote and power in women. If you notice who they're trying to stop, right? All the blockages. And Carol, I have to just uplift it because you mentioned we use the book Collective Courage as the curriculum for Glitter Sisters, which is an amazing book written by Dr. Jessica Gordon-Nembard. And she talks about successful movements that were thwarted in their tracks. And that is, let's look at the Black Panther Party, for example. Fred Hampton was 21 when he was murdered. He got so much done. Can you just imagine if he had a few more years? And what the magic was uplifting women in leadership. They trusted the youth, and then they brought the True Rainbow Coalition together and worked together. Please know that you can support this program becoming an organizational or a corporate sponsor. We would love that. You can click the link below to support the Gen V series.